The stars outside station burned cold and distant, scattered across the void like diamonds thrown across black velvet. The station itself was a massive structure, built by the Empire over 200 years ago as a trading hub between the inner systems and the frontier colonies. It housed over 50,000 beings from dozens of different species, all living and working together in what the Galactic Council called harmony. But harmony was a word that meant different things to different species. For the harmony meant order. It meant rules. It meant knowing your place in the great hierarchy of civilized beings and staying exactly where you belonged. They had been among the first species to achieve faster than light travel, and they had never let anyone forget it. They considered themselves the natural leaders of the galaxy, the keepers of law and tradition, the ones who had brought order to chaos. For humans, harmony meant something else entirely. It meant cooperation. It meant mutual respect. It meant treating others the way you wanted to be treated, regardless of how advanced their technology was or how long their species had been traveling between stars. Humans had only joined the galactic community 30 years ago, which was barely a heartbeat in cosmic terms. They had been discovered by accident when a survey ship had stumbled across one of their early interstellar probes. They had expected to find another primitive species, easily conquered and integrated into the Empire as a servant race. What they found instead was a world called Earth. Earth was what the galactic community called it was a planet where the gravity was crushing, where the weather could kill you in a dozen different ways, where predators hunted in packs and disease spread through the air itself. The oceans were filled with creatures that could swallow a ship whole. The land was covered with plants that produced poison and animals that had evolved natural weapons. And somehow, impossibly, a sentient species had not only survived on this nightmare world, but had thrived. Humans had crawled out of the chaos of their birth planet and reached for the stars, driven by a curiosity and determination that the galaxy had never seen before. They had made the mistake of trying to conquer Earth. The war that followed had lasted only 18 months, but it had cost them more ships and soldiers than the previous 3 centuries of expansion combined. Humans fought with a ferocity that made no sense to the military strategists. They refused to surrender even when the odds were impossible. They adapted to every tactic, countered every strategy, and kept coming no matter how many of them died. In the end, they had been forced to sue for peace. It was the first time in their history that they had lost a war, and the shame of it still burned in the hearts of every who remembered. But that had been 30 years ago. The humans had proven surprisingly willing to forgive and move forward. They had joined the Galactic Council, established trade relationships, and become productive members of the interstellar community. Most species had come to accept them, even if they never quite forgot the stories of what humans could do when provoked. They had not forgotten. They could not forget. And some of them still carried the hatred of that defeat in their hearts, waiting for a chance to prove that humans were not as special as everyone believed. Commander was one of those. She stood in the command center of Station's security division, her 4 arms folded across her armored chest as she reviewed the day's patrol reports. Was tall even by standards, with scales the color of burnished copper and eyes like chips of black ice. She had served in the military during the Human War, though she had been too young to see actual combat. The defeat had shaped her entire career, driving her to prove that she was stronger, smarter, and more capable than any soft. The truth was that hated humans. She hated their strange, flat faces and their soft, pink skin. She hated the way they walked upright on only 2 legs, as if they were trying to pretend they were civilized beings instead of the animals they clearly were. She hated the way other species had started to treat them as equals, forgetting the natural order of things. Most of all, she hated how everyone seemed to fear them. The humans on station were few in number, perhaps 200 out of the 50,000 residents. Most of them were engineers or technicians, brought in to work on systems that human technology had pioneered. They kept to themselves for the most part, living in their own section of the station and rarely causing trouble. Made sure to patrol their section personally at least once a week. She wanted them to know that she was watching, that any violation of station rules would be punished severely. So far, none of them had given her a reason to act, but she was patient. Sooner or later, one of them would make a mistake. And when they did, she would be ready. The commercial district of Station was always crowded during the midday cycle. Merchants from a dozen different species hawked their wares from stalls and shops that lined the wide corridors. The air was filled with the sounds of haggling in 100 different languages, all filtered through universal translators that turned everything into whatever tongue the listener preferred. Daniel Carter walked through the crowd with his daughter Lily's hand held firmly in his own. He was a tall man, broad across the shoulders, with brown hair that had started to show streaks of gray at the temples. His face was weathered from years of working in harsh environments, but his eyes were kind, crinkled at the corners from a lifetime of smiling. Lily was 7 years old, small for her age, with curly hair that she had inherited from her mother and bright blue eyes that seemed to see everything around her with wonder. She clutched a stuffed animal in her free hand, a purple creature that she called Mr. Snuffles, though it did not resemble any animal from Earth or anywhere else. Daniel had brought Lily to Station 6 months ago, after accepting a contract to work on the station's atmospheric processing systems. The money was good, much better than anything he could have earned back on Earth, and he needed every credit he could save for Lily's education. Maria had made him promise to give their daughter the best possible future, and Daniel intended to keep that promise even though Maria was no longer there to see it. Maria had died during childbirth. The doctors had done everything they could, but there had been complications that even modern medicine could not fix. Daniel had held his wife's hand as she slipped away, and then he had picked up their newborn daughter and promised to love her enough for both of them. 7 years later, that promise was still the center of his entire existence. Lily tugged at his hand, pointing toward a stall selling crystalline candy from the system. The candy came in every color imaginable, and it glowed softly with bioluminescent light that made it look like captured starlight. "Daddy, can I have one, please?" Daniel smiled and shook his head. "We just had lunch, sweetheart. Maybe later, okay?" Lily pouted, but she did not argue. She was a good kid, better than Daniel probably deserved. She had adapted to life on the station with the resilience that only children seem to possess, making friends with the children of other species and learning to speak a few words of that she practiced on anyone who would listen. They continued through the market, stopping occasionally to look at things that caught Lily's attention. Daniel was supposed to be back at work in an hour, but he always tried to spend his lunch break with his daughter. Time with her was the most precious thing in his life, and he refused to waste a single moment of it. The crowd grew thicker as they approached the central plaza, where a group of musicians was performing something that sounded like a combination of bells and wind chimes. Lily craned her neck to see, but she was too short to look over the gathered spectators. "Can you lift me up, Daddy? I want to see." Daniel looked around for a better spot, somewhere away from the densest part of the crowd. He spotted an elevated platform near one of the side corridors, probably used for loading cargo. "Come on, let's go over there. You'll be able to see better." He started to push through the crowd, keeping a firm grip on Lily's hand. But the crowd was moving in the opposite direction, pressing toward the musicians, and within seconds Daniel felt his grip slipping. "Lily, hold on tight." He felt her small fingers slide out of his grasp. For a moment everything seemed to stop. Daniel spun around, searching frantically for his daughter's curls among the sea of alien bodies. He saw an and half a dozen other species, but no humans, no small girl with a purple stuffed animal. "Lily, Lily." His voice was lost in the noise of the crowd. He pushed forward, then back, then sideways, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. This could not be happening. He had only looked away for a second. She had been right there, right beside him. "Lily." Half a kilometer away, Lily Carter stood alone in an unfamiliar corridor, tears streaming down her face. She did not know how she had gotten here. One moment she had been holding her daddy's hand, and the next moment the crowd had swept her away like a leaf in a river. She had tried to push back toward him, but she was too small and the aliens around her were too big, and before she knew it, she was somewhere completely different. The corridor was empty and cold. The lights here were dimmer than in the market, casting long shadows across the metal walls. Lily did not recognize anything around her. She did not know which way to go. "Daddy," her voice echoed off the walls, small and frightened. "Daddy, where are you?" No one answered. Lily clutched Mr. Snuffles against her chest and started walking. Her daddy had always told her that if she ever got lost, she should stay in one place and wait for him to find her. But she was scared, and the corridor felt wrong somehow, like she was not supposed to be here. She walked for what felt like a very long time, though it was probably only a few minutes. The corridor twisted and turned, leading her deeper into a part of the station she had never seen before. The walls here were marked with symbols she did not understand, and the air had a strange smell, like metal and chemicals mixed together. Finally, she came to a door. It was bigger than any door she had seen before, with red symbols painted across its surface. Lily did not know what the symbols meant, but they looked important. Maybe someone on the other side could help her find her daddy. She reached up and pressed the panel beside the door. Nothing happened. She pressed it again, harder this time. Still nothing. Lily started to cry again, loud hiccuping sobs that shook her whole body. She was lost and alone, and she wanted her daddy, and she did not know what to do. She sank down against the wall, pulling her knees up to her chest and burying her face in Mr. Snuffles' soft fur. That was how Commander found her. Had been conducting her regular patrol of the restricted section when she heard the sound of crying. The noise was strange to her ears, high-pitched and warbling, not like any sound it would make. She followed it through the corridors until she came upon the source, a small human child, sitting on the floor outside one of the most sensitive areas on the entire station. The child looked up as approached and felt a familiar surge of disgust. Humans were ugly enough as adults, but their young were even worse. This one was covered in some kind of fluid leaking from its eyes and nose, and it clutched a ridiculous soft object as if that might somehow protect it. "You are trespassing in a restricted area," announced, her translator converting her words to human standard. "State your designation and purpose." The child stared at her with wide, frightened eyes. More fluid leaked down its face. "I want my daddy," it said, its voice barely above a whisper. "Please, I'm lost. Can you help me find my daddy?" Felt her contempt deepen. This was what the galaxy feared? This weak, pathetic creature that could not even navigate a simple space station without becoming lost. The humans had somehow convinced everyone that they were dangerous predators from a death world, but all could see was a helpless animal that did not deserve to exist. "You have violated station security protocols," said coldly. "You will be detained until your guardian can be located and charged with negligence." The child's face crumpled, and the crying grew louder. The sound grated on its nerves like claws on metal. She had always hated the sounds that humans made, and the noise this young one was producing was unbearable. "Silence yourself," she commanded. "Your emotional display is inappropriate and disruptive." The child did not stop. If anything, she cried harder, great heaving sobs that made her whole body shake. She was saying something between the sobs, calling for her father over and over again. Patience, never strong when it came to humans, snapped completely. She reached down with one of her forearms and struck the child across the face. The blow was not particularly hard by standards, had not put her full strength into it. She had simply wanted to silence the annoying noise, to remind this inferior creature of its place. But the child was small and soft, weighing perhaps a tenth of what an adult weighed. The impact lifted her off her feet and sent her flying across the corridor. She hit the metal deck with a sound that was somehow louder than her crying had been, and then she was screaming, a high-pitched wail of pain and terror that echoed through the empty corridors. Blood was running from the child's mouth. Her lip had split open from the blow, and an angry purple bruise was already forming on her cheek. She lay on the floor where she had landed, too shocked and hurt to move, her stuffed animal lying forgotten a meter away. Felt a moment of something that might have been satisfaction. Finally, the creature was silent. Well, not silent, but the screaming was at least different from the crying. It would stop soon enough. "Let this be a lesson in respecting authority," said, her voice cold and measured. "You will remain here until security personnel arrive to process you. Any further disturbance will result in additional discipline." She turned and walked away, already reaching for her communicator to report the trespasser. Behind her, the child continued to scream for her father. Did not look back. What Commander did not notice, what she could not have known, was that a small maintenance drone had been performing routine inspection of the corridor's ventilation systems during the entire encounter. The drone was equipped with standard recording equipment, designed to document any anomalies it encountered during its rounds. It had captured everything. The footage showed the small human child sitting alone in the corridor, crying and frightened. It showed Commander approaching, her body language clearly aggressive. It showed the child asking for help finding her father. And it showed striking the child with enough force to send her flying through the air and crashing to the deck. The drone's recording was automatically uploaded to the station's maintenance database, where it was flagged for review by the appropriate personnel. Under normal circumstances, it would have been examined by a junior technician within a few days, and possibly forwarded to station security if deemed relevant. But one of the technicians in the maintenance department was human. Her name was Grace, and she was very good at her job. She had been working on station for 3 years, maintaining the environmental systems that kept everyone aboard breathing and comfortable. She was efficient, professional, and well-liked by her colleagues of every species. Grace was also a mother. She had 2 children back on Earth, living with their grandmother while Grace earned the money to give them a better life. Every credit she earned went into the account that would pay for their education, their health care, their future. When the drone's footage was flagged in her queue, Grace opened it expecting to see a broken ventilation fan or a leaking pipe. What she saw instead made her blood run cold. She watched the video 3 times, unable to believe what she was seeing. An officer striking a human child. A little girl, maybe the same age as her own daughter, being hit so hard that she flew through the air. The sound of the child's screams, captured in perfect clarity by the drone's microphones. Grace's hands were shaking as she saved a copy of the footage to her personal device. She knew she should report it through official channels, should submit a formal complaint to station administration, and let the system handle it. That was what the rules said to do. But Grace had been on this station for 3 years. She had seen how they treated complaints against their own personnel. She had watched other species file grievances that disappeared into bureaucratic black holes, never to be seen again. She had learned that on station, justice meant no justice at all. She made a decision. Grace sent the footage to every human on the station. The message spread faster than anyone could have predicted. Within an hour, every human resident of station had seen the video. Engineers and technicians, merchants and visitors, all of them watched in horror as an officer brutalized a child for the crime of being lost and scared. Then the footage jumped to the station's external communications network. It reached the human colonies first, spreading through the settlements on Mars and Europa and the dozens of other worlds where humanity had established a presence. From there, it spread to Earth itself, uploaded to every major news network and social media platform simultaneously. Within 6 hours of Commander striking Lily Carter, every human being in the galaxy had the opportunity to see what had been done. And then something strange happened. There was no outrage, no protests, no angry crowds gathering to demand justice or burning effigies of officials. The humans did not flood the communication channels with threats or ultimatums. They did not riot or vandalize property. They simply stopped talking. Daniel Carter found his daughter in the station's medical center. A security officer had discovered Lily still lying in the restricted corridor, too hurt and traumatized to move, and had immediately called for medical assistance. The doctors had treated her injuries, which were painful but not life-threatening, and sedated her when she could not stop screaming. Daniel stood beside her bed, looking down at his little girl's battered face. The bruise covered half her cheek, dark purple shading to black. Her lip was swollen where it had split, held together now by medical adhesive. Even in her drugged sleep, she whimpered occasionally, as if reliving the nightmare in her dreams. Something was happening inside Daniel Carter, something he had never felt before, not even when Maria died. That had been grief, overwhelming and crushing. This was different. This was cold, so cold that it burned, spreading through his chest like ice forming on a winter lake. A doctor came to give him an update on Lily's condition. Daniel listened without really hearing, nodding in the right places, asking the right questions. The doctor seemed uncomfortable, unable to meet Daniel's eyes. Word had already spread about what had happened and who had done it. "She will make a full recovery," the doctor said. "Children are resilient. She may need counseling to process the psychological trauma, but physically she will be fine." Daniel thanked the doctor and sat down in the chair beside Lily's bed. He took her small hand in his, careful not to disturb the monitoring devices attached to her fingers. He sat there for a long time, watching his daughter sleep and thinking about what he was going to do. The official response from station administration came the next morning. A brief statement was released, expressing regret for the incident and assuring all residents that a full investigation would be conducted. Commander had been placed on administrative leave pending the results of the inquiry. The humans said nothing. 2 days later, the High Command issued its own statement. After reviewing the evidence, they had determined that Commander had acted appropriately in response to a security breach. The human child had been trespassing in a restricted area, and the officer had used reasonable force to address the situation. No disciplinary action would be taken. The humans still said nothing. Ambassador Cole, who had served as humanity's representative to the Galactic Council for 15 years, sent a formal letter of protest to the Council's administrative office. The letter detailed the incident, included the footage from the maintenance drone, and requested an independent investigation into Commander's actions. The Council acknowledged receipt of the letter and scheduled a review for 3 months in the future, citing a backlog of more pressing matters. Cole did not attend the next council session. When asked about her absence, her office replied only that she was attending to urgent matters elsewhere. Across the galaxy, human ships began changing their routes. Trade vessels that had been scheduled to visit ports filed new flight plans, redirecting to human-controlled stations. Merchant houses that had operated in space for years quietly closed their offices and their personnel. Human engineers working on joint projects with corporations submitted their resignations, citing personal reasons. Human tourists canceled their bookings. Human diplomatic missions were recalled for consultation. The Galactic Council's monitoring systems, which tracked the communications and movements of all member species, flagged the pattern for review. Analysts from a dozen different species examined the data, trying to understand what was happening. Council Arbiter was an ancient being, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. His species had achieved sentience when they were still swimming in their oceans, and he had served as the Council's leader for 300 years. In all that time, he had seen empires rise and fall, wars fought and won and lost, species ascend to greatness and fade into extinction. He had also been present when the first made contact with humanity, and he had watched the war that followed with growing alarm. The humans had fought like nothing the galaxy had ever seen, with a combination of ferocity and adaptability that all strategic models. When the war ended, and the humans joined the Council as equals, had made a point of studying them carefully. He recognized what was happening now. The humans were not protesting. They were not threatening. They were not making demands or issuing ultimatums. They were preparing. Requested an emergency session of the Council's Security Committee. When the members assembled, he presented his analysis without preamble. "The humans are withdrawing from space," he said, his ancient voice crackling through his translator. "They are consolidating their forces and recalling their civilians. They are liquidating their commercial holdings and canceling their diplomatic engagements." The representative, a military officer named General, dismissed the concern with a wave of one hand. "The humans are upset about a minor disciplinary incident. They will complain for a while and then return to business as usual. Their economy depends on trade with the rest of the galaxy. They cannot afford to isolate themselves. Fixed the general with a look that had made beings far more powerful than reconsider their positions. 30 years ago, your people said much the same thing when you attempted to conquer Earth. You believed that the humans would see reason, that they would recognize the futility of resistance and submit to rule. You were wrong then. I fear you are wrong now. General bristled. The war was a setback, nothing more. We were unprepared for human tactics. We would not make the same mistakes again. Perhaps not, but consider what they are doing now. They are not attacking. They are not threatening. They are simply leaving. Every human in space, every ship, every business, every diplomatic presence is being quietly withdrawn. Does that seem like the behavior of a species that is merely upset? The other members of the committee shifted uncomfortably. The representative spoke up, her voice soft but concerned. What do you believe they are planning, Arbiter? Was silent for a long moment before answering. I believe they are preparing for war. Not a war of conquest or territory, but a war of justice. The humans have a concept they call retribution. When one of their own is harmed, they do not simply seek compensation or apology. They seek to ensure that the one who caused the harm suffers consequences directly proportional to the offense. General laughed, though there was no humor in the sound. All of this over a single child? A child who was not even seriously injured. The humans are emotional, but they are not stupid. They would not risk war over something so trivial. Trivial, repeated the word as if it were a curse. General, I have studied humanity for 3 decades. I have read their histories, their literature, their laws. Do you know what their ancient warriors used to say? Touch a man's child and you touch his soul. Humans will endure almost anything in the interest of peace. They will forgive insults, overlook grievances, accept unfairness. But there is one line they will not allow to be crossed. Their children are sacred to them, more precious than their own lives. And when someone harms a human child, the response is not political or strategic. It is primal. The committee fell silent. Even General seemed less certain now, though he did his best to hide it. What do you recommend? The representative asked. Sighed, the sound like wind through dead leaves. I recommend that the surrender commander to human custody immediately. I recommend a full apology from the High Command, not for the humans, but for the child. I recommend that compensation be paid to the child's family and that protocols be established to prevent any such incident from ever occurring again. General shook his head. Impossible. The High Command will never agree to surrender an officer to human justice. It would be a betrayal of everything we stand for. Then I fear you will learn, as you did 30 years ago, that there are beings in this galaxy who do not care what you stand for. The meeting ended without resolution. General returned to space and reported to the High Command that the Council was overreacting, that the humans would calm down given time, and that no concessions should be made. The High Command agreed. Commander was reinstated to her position on station, and a formal statement was released praising her dedication to security and criticizing the humans for their overreaction. Across the galaxy, human communications remained silent. Daniel Carter had not left the medical center since Lily was admitted. He slept in the chair beside her bed, ate whatever the staff brought him, and spent every waking moment either watching over his daughter or reading the messages that continued to arrive from humans across the station and beyond. The messages were all the same, expressions of sympathy, offers of help, quiet promises that what had been done to Lily would not be forgotten. On the 3rd day, Lily woke up. Her first word was "Daddy," and the sound of it broke Daniel's heart all over again. He held her gently, careful of her injuries, and told her that everything was going to be okay. Why did she hit me? Lily asked, her voice small and confused. I just wanted to find you. I didn't do anything wrong. Daniel did not know how to answer that question. How could he explain to a 7-year-old that some beings in the universe would hurt you for no reason other than that you were different? How could he tell her that the galaxy was not the safe, wonderful place she had believed it to be? I don't know, sweetheart, he said finally, but I promise you nothing like that will ever happen to you again. It was a promise he intended to keep, no matter what it cost. That night, after Lily had fallen asleep again, Daniel made a call. The connection took several minutes to establish, bouncing through relay stations across dozens of light years until it reached a carrier ship patrolling the outer reaches of human-controlled space. His brother's face appeared on the screen, older and harder than Daniel remembered. Carter was a staff sergeant in the United Earth Marine Corps, one of the elite soldiers who had been born and raised for combat. He had served in a dozen hot zones across the frontier, and his eyes held the weight of everything he had seen and done. "Danny," said, his voice carefully neutral, "I heard what happened. How is she?" Daniel told him. He described Lily's injuries, her trauma, her confusion about why someone would hurt her. He talked about the official response, the statement praising the officer who had brutalized his daughter. He talked about feeling helpless, about watching his little girl suffer and being unable to do anything about it. Listened without interrupting. When Daniel finished, there was a long silence. "I need you to understand something," Daniel said finally. "I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm not making a request or giving you an order. I'm just telling you what happened to your niece. What you do with that information is up to you." His face was like stone. "I understand." "I mean it. I'm not trying to start anything. I needed you to know." "I know, Danny. I understand." The call ended. Daniel sat in the darkness of the medical center, listening to his daughter's breathing and wondering what he had just set in motion. Carter did not sleep that night. He sat in his quarters aboard the carrier Relentless, watching the footage of his niece being struck over and over again. He had seen combat. He had watched friends die. He had killed enemy combatants at close range and lived with the weight of it. Nothing had ever made him feel like this. Lily was his only niece. He had been there when she was born, had held her in his arms when she was less than an hour old. He had promised Maria before she died that he would always protect her daughter. He had failed. No, he had not failed yet. Failure would be allowing this to stand. Failure would be accepting that an officer could strike a human child and face no consequences. Made some calls of his own. The first was to his commanding officer, Colonel Sarah Mitchell. He told her what had happened to his niece and requested emergency leave to return to station. The colonel the request, not because she did not sympathize, but because she had a feeling about where this was going and she wanted where she could keep an eye on him. "I've seen the footage, Sergeant," she said. "Everyone has, and I understand how you're feeling right now, but you need to let the system work." "With respect, Colonel, the system has already worked. The reinstated the officer who did this. The council scheduled a review for 3 months from now. By the time anyone gets around to caring, my niece will be just another statistic." "I know, but starting a war won't help her." Was silent for a long moment. "Permission to speak freely, Colonel." "Granted." "It won't be a war. A war requires 2 sides willing to fight. What's coming will be something else entirely." Colonel Mitchell studied him through the screen. "What do you know that I don't, Sergeant?" "I know humans, Colonel. I know what we do when someone hurts our children. And I know that right now, every human being in the galaxy is watching and waiting to see what happens next." The colonel disconnected without another word, but she did not try to stop from doing what he was going to do next. The footage of Lily Carter had spread to every corner of human civilization, but the truly interesting thing was what happened after. In chat rooms and private forums, in military channels and civilian networks, humans were talking to each other. Not planning exactly, not coordinating, just sharing their feelings about what they had seen. The conversations were remarkably similar, regardless of where they took place. "Did you see what that did to that little girl?" "I saw, made me sick." "What are we going to do about it?" "Whatever we have to." There were no calls for protest or boycott, no petitions or demonstrations. Those were tools for dealing with problems that could be solved through politics and negotiation. This was something different. Carter shared the footage with his fellow Marines on the Relentless. They watched in silence, their faces hard and cold. When it was done, none of them said anything. They did not need to. The footage spread through military channels like fire through dry grass. From the Relentless to other ships in the fleet. From the fleet to ground installations. From installations to training facilities and recruiting stations and veteran communities on 100 different worlds. Every soldier who had ever worn the uniform of the United Earth Marine Corps watched an officer strike a 7-year-old human girl. And every single one of them made a quiet promise to themselves about what would happen if they ever got the chance to do something about it. On station, Commander returned to duty with her head held high. She had been vindicated by the High Command, praised for her dedication to security. The humans on the station avoided her now, scurrying out of her path whenever she approached, and she took satisfaction in their obvious fear. They should be afraid, she thought. They should understand that authority was absolute, that their status as supposed meant nothing in the face of superior civilization. The incident with the child had been unfortunate but necessary. Sometimes lessons needed to be taught through pain. She did not notice that the humans were not merely avoiding her. She did not realize that their silence was not fear but something else entirely. She did not understand that every time a human looked at her and then quickly looked away, they were not submitting. They were waiting. Ambassador Cole sat in her office on Earth, reviewing the latest intelligence reports from across the galaxy. The picture they painted was exactly what she had expected. They believed they had won. They thought their show of strength had cowed the humans into submission. They were already moving on, treating the incident as a closed matter. They had no idea what was coming. Had served humanity's interests in the Galactic Council for 15 years. She had negotiated treaties, resolved disputes, and prevented half a dozen conflicts from escalating into full-scale wars. She was patient and diplomatic and skilled at finding solutions that worked for everyone involved. But she was also a mother, and when she watched the footage of Lily Carter being struck, she felt something that 15 years of diplomacy had not prepared her for. She felt hungry. The humans were not ready to move yet. These things took time. Ships needed to be repositioned, supplies needed to be gathered, personnel needed to be briefed. But the wheels were already in motion, and nothing in the galaxy was going to stop them. Drafted a message to the human military command, outlining her assessment of the situation and her recommendations for how to proceed. The message was encrypted with the highest level of security protocols, designed to be readable only by a handful of individuals with the proper clearances. The response came within hours. The military agreed with her assessment. They were ready to act whenever the order came. Looked out the window of her office, watching the lights of the city sparkle in the darkness below. Earth was beautiful at night, full of life and hope and possibility. Humans had worked so hard to build this civilization, to spread their presence across the stars, to create a future worth believing in. And they would burn it all down before they let anyone hurt their children without consequence. She sent a final message, this one to Daniel Carter on station. It was short and simple. "Take care of your daughter, justice is coming." Daniel read the message while sitting beside Lily's bed, watching her sleep. He did not know Ambassador Cole personally, but he understood what her words meant. He was not a violent man. He had never been a soldier, never fired a weapon in anger, never wished harm on another living being. But looking at his daughter's bruised face, at the purple and black marks that would take weeks to fade, he felt something changing inside himself. Some part of him, the civilized part that believed in peace and understanding and the fundamental goodness of beings throughout the galaxy, was dying. In its place, something older was waking up, something that his ancestors had carried with them through of survival on a planet that wanted them dead. His species had evolved on a world of predators and prey, where only the strong and the fierce and the utterly dedicated survived to pass on their genes. That heritage was encoded in every cell of his body, waiting to be awakened. And nothing awakened it like a threat to his child. Lily stirred in her sleep, whimpering softly. Daniel reached out and stroked her hair, humming a lullaby that Maria used to sing. The sound seemed to calm her, and she settled back into deeper sleep. "It's okay, sweetheart," Daniel whispered. Daddy's here, and I promise nobody is ever going to hurt you again." Outside the medical center, the station continued its endless rotation around the distant star. 50,000 beings went about their daily lives, buying and selling, working and resting, completely unaware of the storm that was gathering on the horizon. The thought they had won. The council thought they had maintained the peace. The galaxy thought that the incident was over, just another minor diplomatic dispute to be forgotten in the endless churn of interstellar politics. They were all wronged. The humans had stopped talking because there was nothing left to say. The time for words was over. What came next would be written not in treaties or statements, but in fire and blood and the implacable fury of a species that had been pushed too far. They were, and someone had made the mistake of touching their children. Nothing in the galaxy was going to save them from what was coming.